watching Atheist Edge.
Yes.
So if you challenge somebody's perspective on that, if you give them a counter argument that's pretty legitimate or something, then not only they might disagree with you, but if you scan their brain, the same part of the brain that lights up when you do that is the same part of the brain that lights up when they get into a physical fight or flight situation. And so it's showing that those deeply held beliefs are identical in the brain with your physical body and its safety. And so the defense of it is the same. And again, that's all subconscious. It's not a conscious decision to tie yourself to this because you're an ignorant, willfully ignorant person. It's about, this is how important this is to you, and this is how you identify yourself to be. And so that's why it's so difficult to engage with these things for people, is because it is wrapped up in identity in such a strong way that it shows up in the brain scan like that. It's a really tight thing.
Sure, but there's ways to get it to convey that meaning without being openly hostile.
Are there really though?
Yeah.
Of course, there's different styles. Of course.
Yeah, Atheist Edge has been doing it for almost a year and a half now. How many times have we ever gotten hostile? We've never gotten hostile.
Wait, what are you referring to though?
How difficult
the method of delivery. You can have all this cognitive dissonance, you can have deeply held beliefs and have this desire to get it out, but it's the method of delivery. It's what we're talking about on this page.
Kind of.
I don't think it's just tone, though. I mean, every single one of these words would be blasphemy to Orthodox Christianity, and I can say them with a smile on my face.
Those are vanilla, but if you name calling, pointing out specific ad hominems about a certain person, I mean, this is commonplace with both sides. But it's only the non-believers on the page, and they should be. You know what? The moderation on there is good. Just I would like it to be equal. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not sure it can be.
If they think I deserve to get suspended for 7 days for calling a guy a grasshopper, then so be it. But then when someone like Averroes comes on and
wasn't gonna say
I'm sorry.
He is temporarily muted.
Oh, he is?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Well, okay. Well, we have come full circle, grasshopper.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Seriously,
You could call me grasshopper anytime.
Oh shoot! All right.
Call me grasshopper.
You had final thoughts? Anyone?
No.
Well, the reason I brought up the brain scan thing was that you have to be patient with this human condition of that this is who you are talking to. You are talking to someone who holds this so deeply into themselves that they feel physically threatened. And so taking that and understanding that, it's really important to tailor that to tailor what you're saying to the recognition of who you're speaking to. And yes, you can be convinced and shift your view and shift your self-identity, but what will be convincing to one person, is going to be very different from another person. And so it's impossible to know what's going to be that silver bullet that people talk about.
Would it matter if the people we're talking to, they're not novices. They've heard they're doctors of apologetics. They've heard the atheist argument. It's not new to them.
Yeah.
Well, but
they should be used to this.
But apologists are within a very strong bubble of justifying anything that comes at them. And I think what I would think it would be sometimes, at least, would be what Anthony Magnabosco talks about, the backfire effect. If you are invested enough and hold this so central to who you are enough, then no matter what comes at you as evidence, it's going to push you further within your side, and it will never convince you. And so hearing counter evidence, if you measure someone's stance on something before they hear the evidence and after they hear the evidence, they'll be further away from it. So so it can be counterproductive sometimes. But what you guys are doing, if you engage with an apologist, your purpose isn't to convince that person. Your purpose is to convince the audience.
The people watching.
Because the apologist,
the bystander,
the audience.
The apologist not only has a vested interest in maintaining their position, but also they are the one carrying that torch, and so they will be defensive, and they will have their cognition shifted or their rationality shifted by being able to actually hear your message and not just defend it. So they're the one on the stage, and you're never going to convince them, and that's why. But the people in the audience, they don't have that same defense up, and so they can
You
hear
hope.
the argument a lot more clearly.
You hope.
It depends. It depends on the person, because again, the backfire effect can happen within the audience, but more, the majority of the bell curve of listeners to this with a Christian perspective are not on that backfire effect outlier.
Right.
They're not going to be that extreme side. They're going to have a little bit of doubt and have questions, and with you guys having this expertise and background in knowing what you're saying.
You guys know a lot more than probably the average Christian knows.
You lend a lot of credibility to criticisms of Scripture.
Well, and one of the things I think about is this metaphor, like a high school debate team, right? When you do high school debate or moot court in law school, you have to prepare both sides, right? You can't just do the side you agree with. You have to do the other side too. And so I try to step into that role, and even though I am 18 years removed from Christianity, I still very vividly remember what belief feels like. I remember what it feels like to really believe these things. And so often I'll be in this conversation with a Christian, pretty flimsy argument, and then I'll say, well, if I had to step into that role, if I had to go to the other table and defend that side, I don't know that I could do much better. I mean, you guys were talking about the slavery BBC and Dr. Farrer. You know what? It was a big old intellectual mess, but if I had to do it, I probably wouldn't get much better.
I don't think I could have done
I think, you muddy the water, you create distraction, because at the end of the day, the Bible clearly advocates slavery.
It does. If you're being biblical,
if you have to
slavery.
defend the Christian record on this, you're going to throw a whole bunch of stuff at the wall.
Seen, well, you guys followed the thread that he pulled a Dorothy Hamill gold medal performance in mental gymnastics.
Right, so it's not, he drew a bad card, so, but you know what, he's a really nice guy, and let's help him.
He played the best hand that he had.
And it was a terrible hand,
Well, and
he didn't start with a lot of good cards, but he really did a very fair job defending.
So, who could do better, right?
And what I've noticed when I've gone to BBC debates is that you have, I'll listen to a Christian perspective argument, and they have their first argument for like 10 or 20 minutes or something, and it's painfully ridiculous a lot of the time. What the hoops they're jumping through and the rationalizations they're making, and me and the people that I came with are seeing right through that, and it's appalling a lot of the time. But the people around us, the majority of
Christians,
the majority is the Christians. They are like, amen. They really get it. And what I think the cause of that is we talked about this earlier. This person is somebody who has only so much of an interest in this topic at all, and so much of an interest in learning and getting down to the truthfulness of it. And so they're going to take what they need for them to maintain their belief, and they're going to cheer and that's why they're there. And
they want to know that the smart people have it figured out.
Right.
They don't want to have to do the homework themselves.
Underestimate us. Is there any time of
wait. So the apologist, their job is to engage with the people who can grapple with them on a higher level. But the spectators, if you come with a Christian perspective and you have this kind of only so much interest in it, then what you come away with is what the apologist wants, which is only hearing so many words and getting the buzzwords, and you walk away thinking they made the best argument in the world, even if it wasn't.
Right. Because
to you they did, and to you, you're only going to have so much of a background to counter their perspective, and so they bring them down this rabbit hole. And I've seen this before, where like apologists will bring them down this crazy rationalization, and they interject different fields.
It doesn't even make the point, right?
It doesn't make the point, and it doesn't. If you have the knowledge base apart from their knowledge base around science stuff and whatever the arguments that they're making, you can see right through the argument that they're making, and you can see that they're either willfully ignorant and making a misleading argument, or that they are just putting ideas together that they don't know enough about to realize that their argument is completely invalid.
Well, sometimes too, I think they will throw so many topics out that they know that that they can't possibly pull every one of those threads.
Right.
Like I would need a week to respond to every one of those.
Has the other side,
and it's really scary because the person, I'm sorry, but it's
No, you're good to go.
An audience member, what they can't see through that. They can't fact check that. And they may not even want to, but even if they wanted to, it's really difficult for them to see through that based on their psychological
To Rex's point, most of the people in the audience just want somebody who was smart to have already done the work.
Yeah.
That's why Strobel and McDowell sell so many books.
Strobel?
Yeah.
They sell all these books to people that don't even read them.
Right, so that people can have that book up on a bookshelf. Somebody has already made a case.
My faith is reasonable.
My faith is reasonable.
Yeah.
The smart people haven't figured out.
When Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate, and Ken Ham is bringing people who are scientists and engineers and are literally a rocket scientist that works for NASA.
Seriously.
The whole purpose of the exercise is it's okay for you to be a Christian because all of these really, really, really smart people are. So you don't have to listen to the science guy. I have scientists too. Pay no mind to that dude over there in the bow tie. That's what that was all
Balance
about.
the scale.
That's exactly what that was all about.
Yeah.
You were gonna.
Oh, here's how I think we're different. Here's how I think maybe, Courtney, you don't give us enough credit. In these BBC debates, as spectators, have you ever heard any arguments from the other side and gone, "That's a great point. I'm going to look into that," and you might have a point there. Yes? No, not once. Okay. Because it's happened to me.
You know what? Absolutely. So there have been, certainly on some of the earliest ones that were more biblical. Like we've had ones later that are either scientific or social justice kind of stuff. I tend to glaze over because I'm more interested in the New Testament stuff. But on the early ones that are more New Testament oriented, I definitely heard, like you, I mean, I heard the Christian make some point about the New Testament that made me want to go research it, right? Yeah. Like this whole idea that Paul's got something in Corinthians that's an earlier Christian tradition. Yeah, so this made me want to go research that. So when I hear about things, it doesn't like change my mind, but it makes me want to know, I've got a gap in my knowledge, I'm going to go fill it.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, so this wasn't a BBC debate, but I had a conversation with a pastor, and he explained to me, we had a long conversation about, you know, the 10-year date gap between Herod and Quirinius. I don't use that argument anymore. I told him, you're right. He showed me evidence that was satisfactory and met my criteria. Okay. And I don't think there was a 10-year gap anymore. And that's a long conversation. I can show it to you, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll get back on the other side of the fence. For right now, he changed my mind, and I told him. I think that happens more. What my larger point was, I think that happens more often. We're more open-minded than they are. I don't think that could ever happen on the other side.
Yeah, we apply the principles of evidence-based thinking, and on the other side, they show up to the conference. The reason we call it apologetics, they're apologizing for something. They're trying to figure out a way to take new modern facts and moral conclusions and make it fit something old. They are apologizing for the misses in the Bible. That's what apologetics is.
Apologia? I don't think it had anything to do with the word to apologize. Doesn't it mean to defend the faith?
Yeah. To defend.
I don't think it's rude. It's not. I don't think it's rude. It's true. He's based in apologizing.
Well, so I'm not sure I agree with your point though about Christians won't change their mind either, because we've met a lot of very liberal Christians who used to be very fundamentalist Christians who changed their mind about the Bible within Christianity.
So as a former Christian,
it almost never goes in the other
I
direction.
changed my mind, but it's certainly less likely that the idea that this thing is immutable and you have to defend it, right? That's what the goal is.
Well, but you're talking about fundamentalists. I mean, if you say fundamentalists never leave fundamentalism if they stay fundamentalists, then right. But you and I have met lots of liberal Christians who used to be fundamentalists and have renounced that just as much and don't think of the book in the same way. So. I know, within atheists who care about the New Testament, you'll find people who are mythicists who don't think that Jesus existed, and you'll find people who are convinced, the students of Bart Ehrman that are convinced that Jesus did exist. And you'll find people that move between those two camps. You'll find people who, have other views about the non-canonical text, if there's anything historical in it. You'll find ones that disagree about Markan priority and the Q theory. Right. Think that Matthew was first and that Mark is a synopsis of Matthew. We've met Christians and atheists who have argued that. So there's certainly room for debate, but I don't think it's fair to say that only the atheists are ever convinced and change their mind. I think that we've met plenty of Christians who have been convinced and changed their mind, not necessarily enough to abandon Christianity.
I didn't take it that far, but as far as just having an open mind, listening to their argument,
I think it's less likely that a Christian would change her mind or his mind.
There are definitely old earth.
They have to cling to.
Yes, that's what it is. And a lot of times their job, their occupation depends on it.
In some cases.
Yes.
Well, so one thing that's kind of disappointed me about BBC is that there's, whenever I go to a debate, it seems really unequal of the quality of arguments being made on either side. What I mean by that is that when I go, I have, you know, I'm always surprised at the lack of quality argument that's being made from the Christian perspective.
But what have
Because
they got?
I feel like,
I mean,
well, that's what I mean is that I feel like it should be better, and I don't expect it to be that bad, like that transparently illogical. And so it's really unfortunate to me, you know, when I go to this thing and I'm like, oh man, you know, I wish that there were better, it was a better matched debate.
Right.
But then, you know, at the same, like what you're saying is that it's really difficult for those arguments to be legitimate, and unfortunately,
if they were convincing, we'd all be convinced, right?
Right, and unfortunately, you know, there's a lot more going on in that room that causes there to be such an imbalance in the quality of the arguments being made and the reaction of the crowd. So to me, it's a false equivalency.
How many times have you, at the end of the debate, said that the believer won?
So I've never had my mind changed.
Yeah, but you would say the believer had the far more convincing argument.
I've never even thought the believer was the more articulate one.
No, yeah.
I can set aside the debate substance and just think in terms of presentation and you know, speakers, and like if you had two speakers debating some economic topic that I'm not qualified to even know who's right, I could just totally assess them based on presentation.
Yeah.
Not so much content, but delivery maybe.
Yeah.
You've said the believer has won.
No.
No, I have multiple times.
There's
Bullshit.
never been a
Yes,
point where I'm like the believer did a better job in this
I love
debate.
Zach Moore to death, but that last one he did, he was drinking out of the fire hose. He got his ass whooped. He's great at you know,
What he did on
biology.
intelligent design science.
Yeah.
He ecumenical though. He tries to carve out. You don't have to be an atheist. You can still be a Christian. Just believe this. You know, he chose such a narrow band. Instead of saying there's no reason to believe any of this.
My point is that believers will
no reason to believe
never,
any of this.
Yeah.
That's my.
Almost never will you hear that from the other side. Almost never. There's two Christians in particular that seek, and they do it. You know, they make sure no one's looking. Yeah, I think the atheists clinch that one. But aside from those two, I don't know any that will ever concede. Anyway.
Well, so think about it. I mean, we're talking about on a local level here, how these debaters do. Think about somebody like Lee Strobel. Lee Strobel's made way more money than all of us combined selling this Case for Christ and accompanying presentations and movies and stuff. If you actually read the Case for Christ, it is incredibly weak, right? So anyway, I mean, the thing I say about Lee is that he presents himself as this hard-nosed reporter, right? I'm a journalist. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. And who does he talk to? His experts in every single chapter. It's a Christian. It's a Christian. It's a Christian. It's a Christian on the veracity of the Gospels. It's a Christian on the early church. It's a Christian on this evidence and that evidence. All of his experts are Christians. So he's supposedly using his hard-nosed Chicago Tribune journalism skills to go really find the truth about the resurrection. And now what journalist would only ever talk to one side in what's obviously a debate? And so then you get to part two, right? And he says, oh, well, now it's the counter evidence. And I'm like, okay, great. Now he's finally going to talk to an atheist. And so he says, okay, for counter evidence, I'm aware of this group called the Jesus Seminar, and it's all these liberal Christians, and they have criticized the historicity of the Bible. I'm thinking, okay, great. He's gonna go talk to someone from the Jesus Seminar.
He's gonna actually go talk.
And the very next sentence just blows my mind. He says, so I went and found the chief critic of the Jesus Seminar, and I talked to this guy. I'm like, oh, so your counter evidence is to find the critic of the people that might actually be counter evidence, so he can tell you why they're wrong, so you don't need to worry about that. So in terms of, read this, I'm not making this up.
Literally.
And this is just a breathtaking sentence, and from somebody who has sold himself as this hard-nosed journalist, get to the bottom of the truth.
Have you brought this up before? This is damning. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
No, I mean, read the book. It's
read the book.
It'll take you an afternoon.
And I found that with Christian books that we've read in the
You were in an atheist Christian book club.
Yeah, atheist Christian book club.
Yeah.
So many times when I've looked at those books, those kind of rationalizations are made, and the lack of diversity of evidence being presented and all that, you know, they stay within that bubble,
Right.
and it's so transparently, you know, just unethical.
There's a couple of things you can really call them out on, and you'll reading The Case for Christ is an exercise in frustration, and it's basically a more pop. It's more of a pop version of what McDowell did back in the '70s with Evidence, Demands, and Burden. Yeah. And his son is now doing the same thing.
Yeah, we had him on our show.
But so anyway, the first sleight of hand that happens is they will provide so-called evidence for mundane things, right? Like there was a town called Nazareth, and there was a person called Jesus, and there was a Pilate, and there was a crucifixion. These are mundane claims, right? These don't require any myth or miracle. And then they'll use those mundane claims as evidence that the book is reliable. And then once you've got evidence that the book is reliable, they'll say, look, now the book is the evidence for the magic.
Yeah, they'll say
which is a
the magical stuff
they'll
is
say
now.
They'll say something like the Gospel of Matthew contains 10 specific things. It says there's a town named Nazareth, and there was a so and such and such, and
it was reliable on these, so there must have been a virgin birth.
We know for a fact from history, we know that 9 of these things are reliable. Therefore, the virgin birth must also be reliable.
So that's the first sleight of hand is this leap from the mundane to the magic. The second sleight of hand, though, which is really damning of how Christians think about Christianity, is that they will get the expert to say, well, these 4 Gospels could have been written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. There's no evidence to the contrary. The church had this tradition, right? So they get maybe a 10% certainty, right? But Christianity is not selling the idea of could be. It's selling the idea of absolutely certain, stake your faith on it. And they make this leap from could have been, you can't prove it's not, to certain. And then so chapter 2 will start, well, now that we've established that the Gospels were written by these eyewitnesses, now let's see if it's, what they say. It's like it's this leap every chapter from even the expert got you nowhere near certainty. He got you to the possibility of authorship, and so now we're going to go to historicity. Yeah. That's the second sleight of hand. And the third one that you see all over is this about the text itself, right? Like there is a big difference between the question of, do we have the original text of Mark or Paul's letter to the Corinthians or any other New Testament document?
We don't, though.
We certainly don't have the originals, but we have copies of copies of copies of copies. They're probably pretty close. That is a very different question from, was the original recording literal history, right? And so if I had the absolute original copy of the Iliad or the Odyssey, it doesn't mean there was this island with these sirens that would woo in the ships, right? So this is the content of the book.
The Cyclops is not real just because the Odyssey is
a separate question from do I have an original copy?
You will hear the apologists say there are more copies of New Testament texts
than anything else in the ancient world.
You believe the Iliad is the right text. And here's my reply. My reply is you're conflating 2 problems.
Yes.
I don't believe that when the Iliad talks about mythical Greek creatures that they really existed.
Right.
That's the difference.
You're claiming the magic.
You're claiming the magic.
So I think there are both kinds of problems in the New Testament tradition. I think that there are parts of the New Testament that have clearly been altered. The story of the woman caught in adultery in John is clearly a medieval addition. The last chapter of Mark is clearly Mark ended with an empty tomb.
16:9.
And there are other smaller ones, right? But so the question of getting back to the original, let's say we could snap our fingers and get the absolute original Greek. That still doesn't make the magic claims true.
Right.
Words on a page can't be evidence for something magical having happened. Right. Words on a page are evidence that someone wrote those words on that page. And that's a different problem. The person that wrote them may have even believed them, but that still doesn't make them true.
Right.
You know how I am, and if I ever go beyond this, it's because I was provoked. Now, I always start off civil every time, just like now.
Yeah.
If we have believers here, we have believers on the show all the time. It ends with a handshake. Great friends are made. If ever I start becoming firebrand, it's because someone poked a bear. And too often, these believers get on there and they poke the bear. It's a very provocative, very hostile.
There are Christians on there who are hostile. There are Christians on there who are very provocative. There are Christians on there that pull no punches at being extremely derisive and insulting, and all of that.
Thank you.
I don't doubt that at all.
that happens.
There is an unfortunate tendency that those are less moderated than atheists who take the same time.
Thank you again.
What I would say is, I didn't found the group. If we wanted a group, we could do it ourselves. And I'll also say that if we were, if the tables were completely turned, if the five of us got together and created a forum for apologists to come and have presentations to us, we would be extremely inclined to very frequently moderate
I would not. I would not. I would like you. I
At least
would
make
let
it
all in.
equal.
Let
At least
all
make
in.
it equal.
Let